The stars shimmered in the endless void, indifferent to the suffering below. Veldar, once a thriving jewel of the Valoran people, burned beneath the relentless assault of the Gorthak Dominion. Cities crumbled, their grand spires reduced to molten slag. The screams of the dying carried through charred streets, but no one answered. The Galactic Council had turned its back. The great empires of the stars, those who boasted of peace, unity, and justice, found excuses, political maneuvering outweighing morality. The Valoran scientists and diplomats had no armies. They had knowledge, trade routes, advancements in medicine, everything but the will to fight. And so they begged. A final distress signal, broadcast across the known galaxy. A plea, raw and unfiltered, sent with desperation that no advanced species should ever have to feel. They did not ask for war. They did not ask for vengeance. They asked only for survival. The silence that followed was deafening, until a voice answered. It was not from the great empires, nor the powerful merchant guilds, nor the warrior clans that boasted of honor. The voice came from a system barely acknowledged by the Council, a species with no seat at the grand table of the stars, a species known simply as human. The message was brief. Hold on. We're coming. The Villarans did not know what to expect. The few records they had on humanity described them as newcomers, a species that had only recently reached beyond their cradle world, Earth. They had no vast armadas, no technological marvels beyond what others possessed. By all accounts, they were insignificant, and yet they came. Their ships were not sleek or elegant, but rugged and functional. Their technology was primitive by comparison, yet they carried themselves with a confidence that unsettled even the Villarans. The lead vessel, a warship marked UTCS Vanguard, hailed them. Admiral Elias Kane stood before them, his face hardened by experience, his uniform simple but crisp. There was no pomp, no flowery speech, just a man who had come because someone needed him. You called for help, he said. We don't ignore cries for help. The Valoran High Council, weary and broken, questioned the humans' motives. What could they possibly gain from this? Did they seek power, influence, some hidden debt to be repaid? Kane's response was cold and absolute. We don't stand by while butchers wipe out innocent people. The Villarans struggled to understand. Every species in the galaxy operated on self-interest. Every alliance was built on calculated gain. Yet these humans had come not for resources, not for strategy, but for something the Villarans could not quantify. The Gorthak fleet loomed at the edges of their system, an unstoppable tide preparing for the final strike. The Villarans expected the humans to falter, to weigh the odds and retreat. Instead, the humans studied the enemy, not with fear, but with something unsettling determination. They analyzed battle patterns, troop formations, supply chains. They identified weaknesses where others saw none. When the Villarans pointed out the overwhelming numbers, the humans only smirked. They expect us to fight fair, Kane murmured. That's their first mistake. The human fleet moved with purpose, setting up defenses the Villarans had never considered. They fortified weak points, repurposed civilian ships into makeshift battle platforms, turned every asteroid and orbital station into a weapon. They did not prepare for a conventional war. They prepared for a slaughter. And the Villarans, for the first time in their existence, felt something they had never known in the face of annihilation. Hope. The Villarans had always believed war was won by superior firepower, by fleets larger and stronger than the enemy's. The humans disabused them of that notion within hours. They didn't fight like the Gorthak. They didn't fight like anyone the Villarans had ever seen. The first lesson was simple. If you can't win by their rules, change the rules. The humans didn't waste time mourning their technological disadvantage. They studied the terrain, the atmosphere, the gravitational anomalies surrounding Veldar. They used everything, every abandoned satellite, every derelict station, every floating scrap of debris. War isn't about fairness, Kane said. It's about making sure the other guy doesn't get back up. They deployed cloaked mines in the asteroid fields, synchronized orbital bombardments with ground resistance, and created false energy signatures to mislead enemy scans. The Villarans had never seen warfare like this. War as a mind game, not just brute force. When the Valoran scientists expressed doubt, a human officer laughed. You think we won our own world by playing fair? The ground forces trained relentlessly. Valoran soldiers, unaccustomed to direct combat, hesitated. The humans didn't. They drilled night and day, taught their new allies how to use cover, how to set ambushes, how to fight with whatever they had. You're not soldiers, one human sergeant told them. But neither were we once. You don't need to be soldiers. You just need to want to live more than they want to kill you. The Gordhak expected a frightened, demoralized population. Instead, they would face an army of desperate survivors trained by humanity, the most stubborn, relentless species the galaxy had ever ignored. The fleet repositioned in silence. Humans worked tirelessly, modifying ships for rapid maneuverability instead of sheer firepower. Every battle simulation the Villarans had ever run told them that this war was unwinnable. The humans ran simulations too. Their results were different. They're not ready for what we're about to do to them. The final preparations began. Every civilian who could fight was armed. Every building that could be fortified became a stronghold. The planet itself was turned into a battlefield before the first enemy ship even arrived. The Gordhak didn't know. They had no reason to suspect anything. Their victory was inevitable until the first explosions tore through their front lines before they had even fired a shot. The Gordhak fleet entered Veldar's orbit with practiced arrogance. They expected submission. They found chaos. The first wave of ships triggered hidden mines, detonations ripping through their hulls before they realized they were under attack. Defensive turrets, long thought useless against superior warships, fired in coordinated bursts, targeting exposed thrusters and sensor arrays. Every asteroid field was a death trap, every abandoned station a concealed weapon. Their formations broke almost immediately. Humanity didn't fight with grand armadas. They fought with deception, with precision, with brutality. Gordhak Command scrambled to issue new orders, but their communications were jammed. Their targeting systems glitched, hijacked by viruses the humans had embedded into the very signals they used to gloat before battle. Then the real slaughter began. Human and Valoran ships, smaller and more agile, darted through the chaos, striking where the enemy was weakest. They never stayed in one place. They never fought conventionally. They fought to destroy, not to win engagements. Gordhak cruisers tried to regroup, but the humans had already predicted their fallback points. Explosions erupted as waiting strike teams activated pre-placed charges, sending wreckage spiraling into the void. Veldar's surface became its own battlefield. The Gordhak had planned for occupation, for control. They found none. Every street was a kill zone, every building a death trap. Humans had taught the Villarans how to fight like survivors, not soldiers. There was no honor, no order, only efficiency. Gordhak squads were lured into alleyways, only for the buildings to collapse on top of them. Entire convoys disappeared into tunnels that were later flooded with fire. Every moment they spent advancing cost them more than they gained. The Villarans had never believed they could win. Now, for the first time, they believed something far worse. They believed the humans could make the Gordhak lose. The enemy was used to swift victories. This was different. This was methodical, relentless. Panic set in. Gordhak commanders sent desperate reinforcements, but the moment they entered the battle, the rules changed again. A massive electromagnetic pulse detonated in the upper atmosphere, frying everything, human, Valoran, and Gordhak alike. No shields, no targeting computers, no communications. Now, it was a ground war, and humanity had been waiting for that. Villarans watched in stunned silence as human soldiers fought with nothing but their weapons, their fists, and their will. The Gordhak, without their superior technology, were just another enemy to be beaten into the dirt. The tide turned. The Gordhak, for the first time, hesitated. They had never known fear. Until now. The battle had lasted longer than any Gordhak campaign in recorded history. Their forces, once an unstoppable tide, were now scattered, leaderless, and bleeding. What was meant to be a swift conquest had become a slow, grinding nightmare. They weren't fighting an army. They were fighting something far worse, an enemy that refused to break. Humanity did not fight for territory or power. They fought because they had chosen to, because they had decided that Veldar would not fall. And the Gordhak had no answer for that. The remnants of their fleet attempted to retreat, but the humans had anticipated it. Escape routes were already cut off, every jump point disrupted by interference. Their wounded vessels limped through space, only to be picked off one by one. On the ground, the last pockets of resistance crumbled. Gordhak officers, who had once led with ruthless efficiency, found their own troops surrendering or fleeing into the wilds. For the first time, they experienced what it meant to be hunted. Valoran forces, once timid and inexperienced, now fought with a ferocity that stunned even their own commanders. The humans had not just taught them how to wage war, they had taught them something deeper. You don't fight because you want to, Cain had told them. You fight because you refuse to let them take everything from you, and the Villarans understood that now. By the time the last Gordhak stronghold was breached, there was no final stand, no defiant last words. Just exhausted, broken conquerors who had never expected to lose. The transmissions began soon after. Messages sent to the Galactic Council, to every empire that had turned their backs. The Villarans had survived. No, they had done more than that. They had fought back, not alone, not because of alliances, treaties, or political maneuvering. Because when the entire galaxy turned away, one species, only one, had stood beside them. And now, the rest of the galaxy was watching. The Gordhak Dominion, once feared, was fractured. The Council, once indifferent, now scrambled to respond. And humanity? Humanity simply stood there, weapons in hand, looking at the stars as if daring anyone to challenge what they had just done. Veldar was free, and the galaxy would never forget who had answered the call.